Hello and welcome back to the Meadowbank Thistle podcast. My name is Morgan Knock, and if your brow is furrowed and you're asking, why is this English guy talking about Meadowbank Thistle? Get yourself back to episode 1 for 15 minutes of fun. You'll find out a bit more about the project that this podcast is a part of, and a bit more about me. Today, we've got a real character from the early days of Meadowbank Thistle, Stevie Hancock. Stevie joined Meadowbank in 1976, having played in the European Cup for Celtic, the Premier Division for Hearts, and also having spent time down south with Sheffield Wednesday. He joined Alec Ness's side, which was captained by his brother Jimmy Hancock. Stevie played 120 games and scored 12 goals before moving on to play for Stenhouse Muir and 4 for Athletic before retiring at 20. If you're watching on YouTube, you will notice that Stevie doesn't point the camera at his face for the whole time. In fact, he doesn't point it at his face for much of the time at all. But it was still really enjoyable, so I hope you think the same. Today we welcome to the show Stevie Hancock. Thanks so much for joining us, Stevie.
Oh, you're welcome, Morgan. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. So we'll get right to it. Can you talk to me a bit about your childhood and your kind of early life? I gather you were born in Sheffield.
Yes, I was born in Sheffield in 1953. That still makes me a young boy. My father came up here after the war because my mum comes from Leith. So mum and dad, they went down to Sheffield to begin with, and they came up here and then lived in my granny's house back in the day. I think there was about 7 of us living in the one house at the time, and eventually my mum and dad got their first council house at Muir House. So that was the start of mum and dad being on their own, if you like, bringing up four boys, all footballers. So that was the start of it. Way back then, 1956 it was.
So four young footballers. What were your early experiences in football?
Well, obviously playing at primary school, St David's, and then secondary school was St Anthony's, where we had a very, very good football side. And in those 3 years at secondary school, won all the competitions, and fortunately enough, I was lucky enough to get picked for the Scottish schoolboys, along with our goalkeeper, Gordon Knowles. So it was fantastic just to represent your country, a privilege and a real time. Going back to that night, I remember very, very well going through the Parkhead with the school teacher. My dad couldn't take me through because he was working at the time. I went through with the school teacher, and I remember Sean Fallon asking me to sign. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to sign or not, but he did say to me at the time, if you don't sign tonight, then you won't be given the opportunity again. And I still wasn't sure what to do, because there was other clubs floating about that I'd heard of that were interested. The school teacher actually said to me, sign. And, obviously I did sign. And that was me right through to when I was 16. Left the school, went on the ground staff with Tommy Burns, who later on became manager of Celtic. And then when I was 17, I got called up and signed professional. And up to that point, it was a very successful period in my footballing days. And as I said, I turned 17, signed professional, and went full time.
Brilliant. And so you spent some time with Newton Grange?
Yes. When I was called up, Jock Stein had asked me to go and play with Newton Grange Star, which was a junior side. So all of a sudden, you were playing from sort of under 16, and then into junior level, which was ex-seniors. So really what it was, as Jock Stein says, I needed to be hardened up. So I had to play with the men. I wasn't fazed by that, not at all. It was always a challenge for me to test myself. But these ex-seniors, they were, because they'd been upstairs and coming back down the way, they had a lot of experience. So there was quite a lot of pushing and shoving going about. And, people talking to you as I was, a young kid, trying to put you off. But it never really ever fazed me. So it was good, because you had to grow up very, very quickly. From playing with under 16s to to junior level. So it was great. It was fantastic. And I learnt an awful lot in one season being at Newton Grange. So yeah, it was good.
What position were you playing at this time?
I was right through the middle, striker, which always was, from primary school right through school days, straight up the middle, scoring goals. That's what I love doing. But when I was at Celtic, they put me out in the wing because I had a bit of pace, and I don't know if Jock Stein or Sean Fallon saw me as a winger, but in the 4 or 5 years I was there, I never ever played through the middle, which I didn't like, to be honest with you. And that came to a head when my debut against Lima Wanderers, the European Cup tie, second leg over in Malta, and I came on at half time. I must have done okay. So coming back on the plane, Jock Stein, he didn't ask me, he actually said to me, "You're moving through to Glasgow." And I didn't want to go through to Glasgow. So I told him, I said, "I'm not prepared to move through. I didn't like the bigotry through there, what was going on. I never have liked the bigotry. That kind of had something to do with it. But trying to break through, I knew all the players that were ahead of me. And I don't know why, but I just said to Jock Stein, I said, "I'm not moving through. I'm just going to travel through every day from Edinburgh." Because I lived on the west side of Edinburgh, and Glasgow's on the east side. It was only about, back in the day, it was only about an hour drive. So I decided, and I told Mr. Stein, I says, I'm not moving through. And it was kind of strange because after that, he never played me for about 2 months in the reserves. And after 2 months, I approached Mr. Stein. I asked him what was going on. And I says, "If things don't improve, I'd like to get away." And he told me that he wasn't prepared to let me go. So I was a wee bit unhappy with that. So I went home, spoke to my dad. I said, "What do I do here? Because I'm unhappy at Parkhead. I want to get another club." And that's all you want to do when when you're young. You want to play football. He suggested that I write a letter to the board, which I've duly done. And after about a week, I always remember it was a Monday morning, and I was getting changed to do the training, and Willie MacFarlane came in and said, "Mr. Stein wanted a word with me." So I went into Jock Stein's office, and all he said was, "Sign that, sign that, sign that, sign that." And there was 4 forms on his desk. So I signed them, and he said to me, "Right, that's you been released." I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "You have terminated your contract." So I had said to him at the time, I says, and all I could think about was put my hand out and wishing Mr. Stein and Celtic Football Club all the best for the future. He told me in no uncertain manner to get out of his office. The F word. He said, "You can F off." Being a youngster, I didn't know. Well, I knew how to take it, but I thought it was a bit blunt with what he said to F off. So I went out of the office, got changed, and then I walked out. And I met little Jinky Johnson, coming in. And I said to you, "Jinky, that's me, I'm gone." And he couldn't believe it. He says, "What do you mean?" I says, "We just released my contract." So that was me away, and I thought, have I done the right thing? But, having said that, when I was driving back through to Edinburgh that day, and I thought, yeah, I've done the right thing. The only problem was, who's going to employ me now? Which is a problem every player has when he's been released or transferred or whatever. So I had contacts down in Sheffield, and I got this guy to get me a trial down at Sheffield Wednesday, and I went down. Wasn't actually a trial, just like a wee training session, and they signed me that day. So I was delighted with that. And down there at that particular time, there was Jim Craig, who was right back for the Lisbon Lions, when they won a European Cup. So he was there, so that was a good person to team up with. And Willie Henderson, who played with Glasgow Rangers, was out in the right wing. So those 2 players were coming to the end of their career, and that was me more or less starting off in mine, in a sense. It was fantastic, and it was a great experience being down in Sheffield Wednesday. But when I was down there, They sacked the manager, a guy called Derek Dooley. They sacked him on Christmas Eve. I think it was 1973. But they sacked him anyway, and they brought a new manager in. Things didn't improve with the first team. The team got relegated, or the club got relegated, and all the young kids like myself, we were only on 1-year contracts at the time, and we all got released. So after the season, that was me on my travels again. So I came back up to Edinburgh, and I gave John Haggart, who was manager at Newton Grange when I was there. He was coach at Hearts at the time, under the manager Bobby Sheath. John got me down to Tynecastle. Again, had a little training session. I think John had a big influence in getting me to Tynecastle, and Bobby Sheath offered me a contract there and then. So I was delighted to be back home and to sign for Hearts.
Are you a Hibs supporter?
Yes, I was brought up in Leith. So obviously the whole family were Hibs fans. And of course, when I signed for Hibs, all my Hibby mates, I was suddenly the Judas. So I'm not saying I lost them as friends, but, they looked upon me as being a kind of Judas, but that didn't bother me. I was only interested in getting a club, because that was my job after all, and looking forward to playing for Hearts. Actually, believe it or not, I actually loved it there. It was fantastic. Great bunch of guys, very good. And, they're all Hibs fans, Hearts fans, Rangers fans, Celtic fans. But it didn't matter, because you know yourself, when you come together as a team, that goes out the window and you just play together as best as you can. So, it was fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then your first team debut, you get off to the absolute dream start, scoring in a win against Celtic in the League Cup.
That's right. I remember that quite vividly, because I've never ever been nervous before a game, ever, right through my career. But I do remember I was told the day before that I was playing, and I'd never experienced it, but I felt nervous. But once I went out on the pitch, done a warm-up, settled into the game, the nerves went. It's something that it just disappears. And then when I scored the goal, obviously I was delighted. So, it was good. I think I done okay. I done all right, because I think it was a Saturday. We went up to Pittodrie, Aberdeen, and we won 2-1. And I had to score there again. So I thought, this is okay. I've played two. I've scored. I've played 2 games, scored 2 goals. Must be doing something all right.
And are you thinking at that stage, like, I've arrived?
No, really, because to be honest with you, Morgan, that never ever crossed my mind, because even back then as a kid, I think I was 21, although you got a game in the first team and a wee run, I always knew that football's very fickle and things can change in a matter of a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Manager might get sacked, bring in a new manager, your face doesn't fit, and then you're out of favour, and then you kind of got to start again. I've always been like that you don't take anything for granted. I think that's what kept me going to other clubs as well, but certainly I never ever thought that I'd arrived. Not when I was playing with Hearts anyway, so, or any other club for that matter.
You made a strong start, so I mean, you've played in almost all the League Cup games. Then you played in Hearts' first ever Premier Division match, and in total there was 8 consecutive games. You scored 3 goals. You got hooked at half time against Rangers, and then out of the side for a month. And then after that, you got on the bench a couple of times, and then kind of never seen again after.
Well, what happened was, I took a chest infection, and I had problems with it because it was giving me dizzy turns at the time. And I went to the doctor, and I was sent to hospital, and I'd done all the tests, blood, urine, everything, and they couldn't find anything. And I ended up going for a mass x-ray, like covering the chest, the torso. And they said, at the time, that the virus that I had was a virus that was attacking the muscle round the heart. And I says, well, am I going to be okay? And they says, you'll be like this for maybe a couple of months. The pain will go away, but it is what it is. It's just a virus. So that was going coming up to the end of the season. And I think it would be about February time. I was out for about 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then when I went back training, I felt fine, but I just couldn't. I was playing for reserves, scoring goals, but I never ever got another crack at the first team. And then at the end of that particular season, which is about 2 or 3 months after I had the virus, Gordon Haggart decided to let me go. So I thought, well, that's fine. I'll get another club. And other clubs were interested anyway. But there was a thing attaching to that story which wasn't very nice. And I'd said to John, I said, well, if you're going to give me a free transfer, I want my signing on fee, because they never ever paid me my signing on fee. So I never ever got that money, which is a bitter disappointment to me, because I had it in a contract there. And I actually got the Players' Union involved at the time as well. And they didn't do anything for me at all. So it's years and years and years ago now, but it still wrangles with me that they didn't uphold their part of the contract, and they never ever paid me my signing on fee, and I was there for 2 seasons. So bitterly.
Perhaps it's because you're a hippie.
No, it wasn't that. It was just the fact that a contract's a contract, and if I sign a contract and they sign it, you've got to go by what the contract tells you. And between you and I, and you can edit this out or you can keep it in, it wasn't only me, there was other players involved as well. And it didn't just happen at Tynecastle, it happened with many, many clubs back in the day. I can tell you that for fact, and I can name players as well. But that'll go in my book.
So Hearts released you. Was it inevitable that you'd end up at Meadowbank with your brother Jimmy being there?
No, really, because there was other clubs they wanted to sign me, but it was one of those where, because I'd been at Celtic and I'd what happened there with Jock Stein, and what had happened at Hearts, I didn't want to do any travelling. And it was brother Jimmy, that approached me. He says, well, why don't you come to Meadowbank? Then I thought, well, Meadowbank, it's only in the town, don't have to go in. I knew also 2 or 3 of the guys that were at Meadowbank. I thought, that sounds okay to me. So, yeah, I joined and had a good time.
And so did you have to go and get a job at that point?
Yes. What happened was, because I'd been professional, I'd nothing behind me. Only O-levels, and I thought, what can I do? A couple of mates had went into the taxi trade. My oldest brother, Brian, he had a taxi at the time, and he says, what you've got to do, you've got to go and get tested for the streets and that. I think I studied for about 6 months, and I managed to get into the taxi trade, the black taxis. Uber wasn't on the go at the time, but it was the black taxis. And I'd done that for, when I think back, 4 years, I think it was. Jimmy was the same, brother Jimmy. Jimmy had left, and he had went into the insurance industry. And again, it was Jimmy that said to me, why don't you come into the insurance industry with me? I said, well, that's a good idea. And that's what I done. So I went in with Jimmy and done that for 10 years. That's how Jimmy and I became very, very close as well, working together and playing football together. That was fantastic. He looked after me because he's my big brother. But aye, it was good, really, really good.
Can you talk to me about Alec Ness, who was the manager when
Well,
you joined?
I was only there, I think it was months. I wasn't there a long time when Alec left. And Alec was, I would say, he was old school. Never got involved in any coaching. And the only time I saw Alec was on match day, and he would just come into the dressing room and read out the team, and that was it. And you just went out and played. There wasn't a lot of tactics in those days. I'll probably come on to that later on. You more or less, managers back in the day just set up the team and kind of left you to get on with it. I know it's different now, totally different. But football was changing back in my era when I was playing. Different formations were coming in. Not that really bothered me, because I was basically through the middle and I was a striker. If people were supplying, crosses into the box and that. That was my job, to get in on the end of crosses and just try and find the net. No, there wasn't a lot of tactics. So Alec, he was just old time school. Just picked a team and away you go.
So Laurie Glasson was taking training.
Aye, Laurie was a great guy. Kind of laid back, Laurie. Loved him to bits. But again, Laurie was more of a trainer, not a coach, if you understand what I'm saying. So, aye, Laurie was got his fit. And again, Laurie he was quite quiet, unassuming, but I liked him a lot. He just didn't interfere. He just says, on you go, lads, on you go and play. And that's what we did. And I think most teams back in those days done that. They just went out and played, as far as I'm aware anyway. But it is
Do you
different.
remember your first game for Meadowbank?
No, I actually can't, believe it or not. I can't. It might have been a friendly or something, but I certainly can't.
Well, so the first competitive game, it was a 0-0 draw at the stadium against Brechin.
Right.
But very early on in your Meadowbank career was the infamous East of Scotland Shield game against Hearts. It's a big contrast to kind of you left Celtic and went back with Hearts and beat them. You've left Hearts but come back with Meadowbank and lost 8-0. How are you feeling after that?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't even remember that. I was in talking to Jim at the weekend, and he can't remember either, because I asked him about the goal that he'd scored at Hampden, and you had said that one of the Meadowbank Thistle fans had said it was the best goal he'd ever seen. I said to Jimmy on Saturday when I went to visit him, I says, "Can you remember that?" He went, "I never scored a goal." I says, "You did?" I says, "Seemingly it was just 30 yards at Hampden." And he says, "No, no, no." He says, "I never ever scored a goal. Not from 30 yards anyway." I says, "Well, that's funny." I says, "Because I can't remember either." So I don't
Well, I
know.
mean,
Honestly, I
it
just
was
can't
Thistle.
remember.
It was Thistle supporter Charlie Lowry who sent that
You
in,
were
and
saying
he has
that,
vivid memories of a lot of goals. So I mean, I don't doubt that it happened, but obviously
it must have
more
happened,
memorable
yeah.
for him than you guys. And then he maintains that was the best goal Thistle ever scored. We'll have a debate on that one in a future episode.
Yes, aye.
But yeah, so in the November of that season against Forfar, the matchday programme described that you scored a goal that Gerd Muller would have been proud of. Do you remember that one?
All I remember was Gerd Muller, he was a penalty box striker, wasn't he? So, and that was my game. I just played inside the box, the old-fashioned striker, fox in the box. I just can't recall that moment at all.
So in your first season, only Jimmy played more games than you. What was it like playing alongside him?
Well, Jimmy was team captain, as you know, and he was a good influence, because I remember Jimmy talking to some of the younger guys before the game, even before they got stripped. And Jimmy would be out in the pitch, and he'd maybe take a couple of the youngsters with him. And I would say, "What are you doing?" He says, "I says, they're just young kids." He says, "I just want to settle the nerves down a wee bit." So that was Jimmy using his experience. And I thought to myself at the time, that's fantastic. Do you know what I mean? You know, when you're a young kid, like say Gordon Fraser coming through, David Conroy, they'd be a wee bit nervous, wouldn't they? So it was nice of Jimmy to pass down his experience to these guys and others. Just telling them, look, it's just a game of football. Just play your normal game. And that was Jimmy. You know, he would help anybody as best as he could. Which, apart from his experience, King made him a good captain that people could go to if they had any problems. They could go and speak to Jimmy, and Jimmy would be able to use his experience and give them answers for whatever questions they had. Aye, he was a great captain, a good penalty kick taker as well. Bottom right hand corner every time.
So I mean, Jimmy was one of the only players with senior experience in the very earliest years as Meadowbank.
Yes,
So it's kind of him and Derek Gray, the goalkeeper.
yes.
Was Jimmy far better than everybody else?
Jimmy was very. You could see even back in those days that Jimmy had been around, if you know what I mean. Played it simple, never tried anything elaborate. Played the ball easy, nice and easy. Him and I have often spoken about that. Back in those days with the coaching, certainly down in England, the coaching down in England was far and away much, much, much better than what we got up in Scotland. And I noticed that when I was with Sheffield Wednesday. I learned more in one season at Sheffield Wednesday than I learned with all the rest of my clubs up here. It's just, there seemed to be more concentration on coaching down in England. So that experience that Jimmy had in Villa, he was with Aston Villa in Leicester City. He brought that up the road, the experience, and he tried to relate to people. Football's a simple game. It's the ball that does the work. And you could see when Jimmy played, that's the way he played. And I would like to think that it rubbed off on some of the Meadowbank players. Because as a kid, sometimes you can go in and try the impossible pass, or try and dribble when you shouldn't dribble, and stuff like that. Jimmy tried to use as much experience, or all the experience he had when he was with Meadowbank, so he could pass it on to youngsters. And as I said before, that's what made Jimmy so good at what he'd done. And I think that's the reason why he was captain, because he had the experience.
Brilliant. So, what was a typical match day like when you first joined Meadowbank, and how did that contrast to the bigger clubs that you'd been at before?
Well, one of the differences was in the changing rooms at Meadowbank, it was just like locker rooms, so it wasn't particularly a big room where like Easter Road or Tynecastle. It was like being at the swimming baths. Everything was tight, so when anybody spoke, you could hear it, and it was reverberated, and it was like, seemed quite loud. So I remember Willie one day, Willie MacFarlane going off his head, and my God, I think people in Midley Town would have heard him from where he was. It was really, really loud. And we were like that when we got on the pitch. Thank God we're out of there. It was a strange experience. I must say that it was very, very strange.
I mean, let's rewind a bit before Willie came in.
Yep.
So Alec Ness stepped down as manager.
Yes.
And there was a period where there wasn't a manager, or Laurie Glasson was just taking training and taking the team.
That's right.
What changed in that period?
Nothing really changed. When Willie came in, I think because he'd been manager of Hibs, I think we all thought there's going to be big changes here, which we were all looking forward to, because obviously we wanted to get better as a side. But when Willie came in, nothing really changed that much. Some of his decisions and team selections were, well, I'm going to say it was a wee bit, to me, and to Brother Jim, it was a bit crazy. There was one particular day when we went in and he read out the team. So he's went Derek Green goals, Stevie Hancock right back, Jimmy Hancock left back, Dave Cathcart centre half, Davy White at centre half as well. So I was like looking at Jimmy, and Jimmy's looking at me, and I'm going, I can't be playing right back. I've never played right back in my life. So I went to Willie. I said, have you made a mistake here, Willie? And he went, no. I said, you're playing right back. I said, I've never played right back in my life. I've played out in the wing, I've played striker, I've played midfield. I said, well, I've never played right back. He says, well, you and Jimmy at the back, use your experience. Well, I think it only lasted 10 minutes, and I thought, I'm out of here. I think Willie must have noticed it. I mean, I was going up the right wing like a winger. I was trying to make sure that, obviously had the space, trying to help out the right winger, and I'd maybe overlap him, and possibly I shouldn't have. I was just wanting to go forward all the time. And of course, that left our winger, And then Willie kept shouting out the first 10 minutes, get back. So I had to get back and try and mark the winger, I couldn't tackle a supper, to be honest with you, you know what I mean? I thought, I'll come out of here. So I says to Willie, I says, put my hand up after 10, 15 minutes. It was actually on the dugout side. I managed to see Willie. I'm not enjoying this, Willie. He went, right, he says, go up front. I went from right back to left wing. So it was just decisions that Willie would make, and I thought, this is not it. And even Jimmy says, what's he doing? And I said, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Willie was the type of character that whatever he said, that was it, kind of thing. So I don't think Terry got much of a say in the coaching department. And I think that came to fruition when Terry eventually took control of Meadowbank because Meadowbank became a better side 10 years later. But I don't think Terry was given a role as a coach, as you say, trainer, along with Laurie. Yes, he's got his fit, but again, he just went out and Willie says, "That's a formation, out you go." So tactically, I don't think Willie was, to be fair, I don't think he was tactically aware of what was going on.
Did the players respect Willie?
It's a good question, but I think when, especially with Jimmy and I, because we were kind of more or less the senior players, I think they could see that Jimmy and I, didn't have much respect. And I possibly think that rubbed off on the players. So maybe it was my fault and Jimmy's fault for being, in a sense, negative, but I just think with the experience that Jimmy had and I had down in England, that both of us were expecting more from Willie than what he actually had or could give. And I certainly thought when Terry came, that the coaching would have got better, but I really don't think that Terry was given the rein. I think Willie just said to Terry, "On you go, and leave the rest to me." Because when Terry was there, certainly when Jimmy and I were there wasn't a lot of coaching involved. You maybe get corner kicks, and that was it. There wasn't any free kicks or how to keep possession, when to run, when not to run. Do you know what I mean? No, Willie was a bit of a disappointment, to be honest with you. And the other thing that he'd done was, this is quite incredible. Back in the day, I would buy the local paper, the Edinburgh Evening News, and there was an article on the back page. And the heading was something like Meadowbank Thistle, where Stevie Hancock going to Hong Kong Rangers. Back in the day, Hong Kong Rangers were interested in a lot of Scots players. So anyway, I've read this article in the papers, which I knew nothing about. And Willie was a bookie. He had a bookie's office in Davis and Main in Edinburgh. So I went to Willie and I actually cut the article out and I stuck it through. It's like a wee cashier's desk in a bookie, is it? So I stuck it through. I said, "What's this about, Willie?" He says, "I've sold you to Hong Kong for £10,000. I says, "What do you mean?" I says, what are you talking about?" He says, "Meadowbank Thistle have agreed a transfer fee for you to go to Hong Kong." I says, "Well, I'm not going to go to Hong Kong." I said, "I don't know anything about this." I says, "Surely, if the club was wanting to sell me, you should have brought me into the talks, into the negotiations." He says, "It's almost done and dusted." I says, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to go to Hong Kong." But there's crazy things that he'd done like that. Another time we were up at Brecon. This is unbelievable. We went up on the team bus. I think it was the second last game of the season, and I think we were second from the bottom, or maybe possibly third. And Jimmy had said on the team bus going up, and we were up the back of Jimmy says, "Everybody up the back of the bus." Jimmy says, "Right," he says, "we're not coming up here to get the wooden spoon." He says, "We want 100% effort from everybody." So, and that was part of his job. So we went out, cut a long story short, we've won the game 2-1. And we've came in, Willie, all the rest of the guys was in the showers, and there was only Jimmy and I in the dressing room at the time. And Willie was kicking all the dirty pants and socks about and shirts. He was kicking them like a football everywhere. Jimmy says to me, he says, "What's wrong with you, boss?" And Willie says, "I don't believe it, I don't believe it." Jim says, What do you mean? What do you mean?" He says, "We've won 2-1. We're not going to finish up bottom of the league." He says, "It was a great result coming up to Glebe Park at Brecon. We've won 2-1. What's wrong with you?" And Willie went, "Don't believe it, don't believe it." Jim says, What is it? What is it?" He says, "I don't believe it." He says, "I had a bet on Brecon. I had £70 on Brecon at 3-1.
Oh my God.
Absolute classic, eh? And I'll tell you now, from that day forward, my respect went right out of the window. And it was the same with Jimmy. Because coming back on the bus, I just couldn't talk to anybody. It was like a defeat. Because all that was in my mind, coming back all the way down from Brecon, was How can a manager put a bet on his own club? You know what I mean? Cut. He had unbeaten at 3-1. I mean, it's just unbelievable. That was me. Psychologically, I was finished with Willie. After that, I thought, nah, I've lost. What respect I had for him, it just went right out the window. I thought, nah, I'm not having this. And Jimmy was kind of the same, you know what I mean? So that was me done with Willie, actually. And that was the first season. The second season, when we went back, was obviously I was in the contract. Just other stupid things he done there. Playing people out of position, and as I said before, we played me right back, it was just ludicrous. And just other players were getting played out of position as well. And I thought, nah, you've got to get your roots corrected. You've got proper defenders, proper midfielders, proper strikers. But it was like a mix and match, you know what I mean? And I don't think that helped the players because it wasn't really a settled team. We always had a settled formation, but we never had a settled team. I suppose you've done alright, but certainly at Meadowbank it didn't make any difference. I don't think. And I think most players that you spoke to when I played would say the same. Didn't make any difference.
They have, to be honest. It's interesting that you mentioned Hong Kong though, because Hugh McGoran and John Watson both did go to Hong Kong Rangers.
Alright,
But I've always been fascinated with what the link was and how that came about.
yeah. Well, all I know is what I told you was that whether Meadowbank approached Hong Kong Rangers or it was the other way about, I have not got a clue because I just don't know what happened. And that's all I read in the newspaper was that Meadowbank had agreed a transfer fee for my services to go to Hong Kong. And as far as Willie was concerned, I was going. And I never had a clue what was going on. And that was it. I read it in the newspaper, and that was it.
I mean, you're playing in a struggling team, but you did manage to score a few goals. Was this still a springboard back to the top, or was this just the new reality?
No, I was just a reality, Morgan. It was just like, to be honest, because I'd been with Celtic and Sheffield Wednesday and Hearts, I kind of knew that I wasn't ever going to get back to those heights, if you want to call it that. So really, what it was I just wanted to start enjoying my football again because I'm not saying I never ever enjoyed it. I always did, but it was like a reality check. I thought, well, to be honest with you, I think I've reached my level and I'm never ever going to get back up again. Which didn't bother me because, all I wanted to do was play football. So, no, it was fine. Still enjoyed it.
Are there any particular matches that stand out especially vividly in your time at Meadowbank?
Well, the one that stands out very clearly was when we played Alex Ferguson's Aberdeen at Meadowbank. It was the old League Cup. So Aberdeen's came and they've got the McLeishes, the Strathans, that really, really good Aberdeen side. And I think Fergie at the time was building Aberdeen. And they came to Meadowbank and I think they beat us 5-0. And because they were full time, we were part time, it was like chasing shadows. We just couldn't get the ball off them at all. We were zipping the ball about with pace. And any time we got possession, we just lost it. You know what I mean? So after the match, I remember sitting in the dressing room and going, "This is the difference between being part time and full time. How quickly the full timers can move the ball about. As part timers, you really, really struggle to keep up with it because it's such a fast pace that you play it. And I know that from my days being with the Hearts, and there was always a difference when you came up from reserve football to first team football. The pace and the ability to keep in check with the pace could have been quite difficult at the time. And it certainly was for us at Meadowbank when we played Aberdeen. And although they beat us 5-0, I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday night at Meadowbank. On the Saturday we went to Pittodrie and we seemed to play better, believe it or not. at Pittodrie, and they beat us. I think it was 2-0, maybe 3-0. I thought we
I think it
actually,
was 4.
I thought we played quite well that day. Although they got beat, so it was something like 8-0 on aggregate. But the second game, we seemed to play a wee bit better. I don't know why. Possibly they took the foot off the gas a little bit. That might have had something to do with it as well. The fact that they'd won 5-0. So to them it would be just like a training exercise. For us, it wasn't. But I thought we played quite well in the second leg, to be honest with you. I thought the players stood up to the task, and we certainly tried. But, it's that difference between being full-time and part-time. It's trying to keep up with the pace. But again, it was a good experience.
Who were the most talented players who were with you at Meadowbank?
That's always a good question, because being a forward, I always look at forwards, and I would say certainly Kenny Davis was very, very skillful. Now, Kenny had come from Hibs, and he broke his leg with Hibs, and wasn't treated very well either with Hibs after he had his leg broke. I think they gave him a free transfer, and I think that's when he went to Meadowbank. But Kenny was very, very skillful, and I remember one particular game we were playing East Stirling, and Kenny had nutmegged the right back. Kenny played wide on the left, and he nutmegged this guy, and I just burst out laughing, and because the right back went after him again, and Kenny nutmegged him again, twice within about 10-15 seconds. And I thought, how did he do that? It was just very, very skillful. And I think Kenny had a lot of experience as well. He was slightly bulk, Kenny, but he was bloody good. He was great on the ball. All left-sided, you know what I mean? He was a left footer, and I had a lot of time for Kenny. And then they started a wee guy called Alan Williams out in the right wing. Wee Alan had a lot of potential. He come from Tartan Boys Club, I think it was. And he came with Davy Conroy and Gordon Fraser. I think Alan come from Tartan Boys. I might be wrong. I know Davy Conroy and Gordon Fraser come from Tartan Boys Club. And they were very, very promising as well.
Your time at Meadowbank came to an end. It was a 2-1 defeat away to Berwick.
Mm-hmm.
You and Jimmy were wearing 10 and 11 that day. Did you know that you'd both be leaving at the end of that season?
No, I'll tell you what happened there. I do remember, it might have been the second last game of the season. We were playing Cowdenbeath at Meadowbank, and I had a burst toe, so I wasn't fit. And Willie said to me, "You're going on the bench." I said, "Well, I can hardly run with this foot of mine." He says, "Don't worry, you're not going on. I'll put you on the bench just to make up the numbers." I went, "Right, that's fine, Willie, that's fine." It was pouring rain that night, never forget it. And we were getting beat 3-1, I think it was, and there was about 5 minutes to go. I was sat next to Terry that night. Willie had said to Terry, "Tell Stevie he's going on." We're getting beat 3-1 with 5 minutes to go. So I said to Terry, "I'm not going on." I says, "My foot's too sore." I says, "I can hardly run." Willie must have heard what I'd said. And Willie says, "Get ready." I went, "No." I says, "I'm not going on." He said you were putting me on the bench. I says, "There's only 5 minutes to go. We're getting beat 3-1. I says, "I'm not going on." And he went ballistic. So the end of that particular game, there's a bar in Marrinville Road, which is just outside the stadium, and we're all going over there for a wee end of season drink. And the players were filing backwards and forwards to Meadowbank to see who was getting kept on, whose contracts are getting renewed, what players were going to get released. And I was last over to the stadium. All the rest of the guys had been over and come back. Some guys were saying, "Oh, I've been released." Some of the guys were saying, "Oh, I've got another year's contract." So Laurie Glasson had come in and said, "Right, Steve, you used to go over to the stadium." I said, "Tell Willie I'll see him later." I says, "I'm going home." So Laurie went away, and oh my God, within 5 minutes, Willie came storming in the pub. And we were all sat there, and he started pointing his finger at me, calling me this, calling me that. I said, "Look," I said, "you don't have to swear and stuff like that." I said, "Oh, Willie," I said, "behave yourself." I said, supposed to be a manager. And there was locals in there as well, some fans and that. I says, look, I'll speak to you. I says, when the time's right. I says, a pub's not the right place to talk about this. And he was like, F you and this and that. And I was shocked. So I went away home, and the following day I received a telegram that they were going to hold on to my contract. I went and see him at his office again. It was bookies. I says, look, why don't you just let me go? I says, you got me for nothing. I says, just let me go. No, I'll get a fee for you. I'll get a fee. I went, who's going to buy me? I've had such a miserable time at Meadowbank. I says, who's going to buy me? So he says, if that's what you want then, right, I'll give you a free transfer. I went, right, that's fine, thank you very much, see you later. And that was it. That was me done. And then Jimmy had phoned me, and he says, how did you get on? So I told him what happened. He says, I'm just going to park in as well. He says, I've had enough. You know what I mean? And what I said to Jimmy was, at the time, I says, you've had enough of what? Is playing football or what? He went, I've had enough of Willie. And I went, really? He says, aye. He says, no. He says, I can't play for him anymore. It was what it was at the time, and Jimmy had just had enough as well. That's when I decided to pack in football, actually. I remember saying to the wife at the time, I says, I'm done. I says, I've just had enough. Not that I ever disliked playing football, but I just had enough of what was going on behind the scenes and what was happening with my various clubs. And I'd actually made my mind up to pack in. I thought, no, I've had enough. But that only lasted about 3 weeks. And then 3 weeks later, I signed for Stenhousemuir. But I just kind of...
So, before we move on to Stenhousemuir, have you got any more stories about Willie?
Only one, I think, was we played Inverness in the Scottish Cup. I think it was... There was two clubs in Inverness at the time, wasn't there? There was the Calais and the Thistle. Inverness Calais. And then we played them at Meadowbank. They got a draw, so we had to go back up to Inverness to play the replay. But after the first game, for some unknown reason, Willie decided to throw a party at his house. And at that time, Willie stayed at Silverknives down by Barnton. And so all the players went to his house and had a party, and that got a wee bit out of hand because one of the players who shall remain nameless was chatting up his daughter, and Willie didn't like it. He says, right, the lot of yous get out of my house. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, so we're all tossed out of his house. So it was good of Willie. You know, this is more or less when he first kind of came to the club. And I don't know if it was a bonding session or what the hell it was, but he decided to throw a party. And but that didn't. At the end of the night, you know what it's like when people get drinking and things started to get out of hand a wee bit arguing amongst ourselves. With his daughter being on the season, one of the laddies sniffing about her. As I say, I'm not going to tell you who it was, but it wasn't me. It was just...
I'll ask you off camera.
Ask me off camera, aye. These are all just great things that you learn from, and you know, you can look back and have a laugh at them now.
Do you wish you'd been at Meadowbank to see Terry Christie take over?
Yes. I don't think Terry under Willie was given a role for Terry to be himself and for Terry to do his own thing. Willie just had that thing that he wanted to do, or wanted to be known as the manager, stroke coach, stroke trainer. Maybe you can ask Terry this, because I'd love to know the answer. When Terry was at Meadowbank with me and Jimmy and the rest of the lads, I don't think he was given much head to do what he wanted to do. And I think when he eventually took over, Meadowbank became a better club, in my opinion, because I used to always look at the results and them out, and I thought, Meadowbank's doing well under Terry, and I was delighted for Terry. I thought, because this guy deserves a chance to do his own thing. So I was very, very happy for Terry, and I think he made a success. certainly made the club a
That's
lot
fair to
better.
say. So you're moving on from Meadowbank. When did you first hear that you might be able to move to Stenhousemuir?
Well, that came out of the blue, Morgan, because, as I said, in my mind, I'd packed in. And I don't know how Stennis Moore found out about it, because I can't remember anything being in the newspaper or anything. It might have been something. But through football circles, the word must have got out that I was a free agent again, and I got a phone call from the manager at the time called Harry Glasgow, and he says, "Can I have a word with you?" I went, "Aye, sure." So at that time I was living in Pennycook, and he came through, and he more or less said I was too young to call it a day. He says, "Look," he says, he had asked what had happened wrong, or what went wrong at Meadowbank, and I says, "Look," I says, "it was this, it was that, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "I noticed, certainly when we played against you," he says, "you never played through the middle." I went, "Oh, that's right, I was shooting the wing, yeah." He says, "He must have known a bit of my history or something." He says, "Look, you've always been a striker." He says, "If you come to Stennismuir, I'll play you through the middle." He says, "And I've got a big striker coming, a guy called Gavin Murray." He says, "You'd be a perfect foil for him." He says, "He's about 6 feet, and I'm going to use him as a target man, and you can play off of him. In fact, you can play, you actually say you can play where you want." I says, "Well, that seems quite good to me." I says, "I'd love to play through the middle, especially with a big striker." And I'll tell you what, Morgan, this guy, Gavin Murray, was fantastic for me, because he was very, very unselfish. He would win the ball in the air, he would chest it down, he would play into the little pockets of space and everything. Absolutely perfect target man. And him and I just had this thing which is hard to describe. We just gelled from day one, and we had a fantastic partnership up front. And that was me back scoring goals again, and really, really started enjoying my football again, much more so than what I did at Meadowbank. And I put it down to Harry Glasgow, because he just says, "You just go and play your game." He says, "I didn't want you drifting wide." He says, "I want you through the middle." He says, "Scoring goals." And whenever he said that, I thought to myself, this sounds good, this sounds promising. And out of all the clubs that I played with, that was my most enjoyable football experience, was playing with Stennismuir. Um, and again, Harry would just have his formation and just say, "Go out and play." No coaching. Our goalkeeper was Stuart Kennedy, who used to play for Glasgow Rangers in Scotland. And centre half was a guy called Jim Black, who played centre half. And there was me. What they say, the spine was, we had quite a bit of experience between the three of us, and the rest of the guys were. So we had legs in the team, we had experience in the team, and that mix made us have a fantastic season. And that was fantastic. It was really, really good. Really enjoyed it. And what had happened there at the end of the second season, Harry came to me and says, "Look, Foffer's made an approach for you." He says, "You've offered." Well, I was told it was 11,000, which was a lot of money for a club like Foffer. Um, I says, "Look, Harry, I didn't want to go." I says, "I've got my full time." I says, "Foffer's miles away from Pennycook. It's actually 84. I says, "I don't want to be working, going home on a Tuesday and Thursday and travelling away up to Forfar there and back 2 nights a week. And if we're playing at home, back up on this." So I'd got in contact with the chairman at Kane, and both of them convinced me that, the club wanted the money and would have. And I said, "No," I said, "I'm not going." And they were kind of pleading with me, "Oh, the club needs the money, we'd love the money." I said, "Look, you got me for nothing." I said, "Now you've accepted 11 grand or 12 grand, whatever it is." I said, "You got me for." I said, "Now you want it." "Oh, we need the money, we need." So reluctantly I went and I signed for. But I really didn't want to go, to be honest, because I felt really settled, really enjoyed my foot. confidence was so high. I just felt like whenever I went on a park, I was going to score. That was my mindset. I think I'm going to score today, and I knew it. I'm not saying I scored in every game, but that's just the feeling that and the confidence I had at the time, especially playing with Gavin Murray up front. I thought, well, this is making my job a lot easier. I'm not up on my own all the time, which happened throughout my career. Somebody to play with in a partnership was fantastic. But as I said, I really didn't know. But I would say I was kind of forced out the door a little.
Was it financially worthwhile for you?
Well, in those days you didn't have agents, so you had to negotiate your own signing on terms. So I managed to negotiate a wee pot of money in the bank for me, because I certainly wasn't going to go. Not when I was enjoying it as much as that. And the money, there wasn't much difference with wages or anything. In fact, it was just the fact that, Snowsmith wanted the money for me, and I was actually a bit peeved off that money came before me but they wanted the money, and I thought, well, if they want the money, but I was a wee bit peeved the fact that they'd got me for nothing really, and they'd capitalised on the fact that I had such a good couple of seasons there. It attracted the interest of offer, and they were prepared to pay me the money or pay the club the money and give me a sign-on fee. I thought, well, financially, I'm a wee bit better off insofar as I'm getting a sign fee out of it. But in terms of which wasn't great in those. A lot of these clubs don't have a lot of people coming through the turnstile, so they can't afford to pay you big wages. I think it was about £5 a week or something back then, plus so it wasn't a lot of money at all. But certainly a transfer that I negotiated in terms of signing on fee helped a little bit. So
So while you were at Stenhouse Muir, you were nominated for Second Division Player of the Year. Team wasn't spectacularly successful, but how does it feel to be nominated for an individual award like that?
well, it came as an utter surprise to me because I didn't even know that those things existed. Because I really didn't pay much attention to awards and stuff like that. I just concentrated on playing my game every week and doing my best. It was one of the players, it must have been in one of the papers through the West or the Central Belt there, had said that there'd been a bit having a laugh and a joke about it. He says, oh, you've been nominated for the Player of the Year for the Second Division. And I went, what's that like? I didn't even know it existed. He says, are you and two or three other players? I says, oh, if I win it, I win it. It really didn't bother me, to be honest with you. I just wanted to enjoy my. I can't even remember who. I didn't even get an invite to the ceremony or nothing. Oh, it doesn't bother me. I'm not. But I thought from the club's point of view, if I'd got it and it'd been a wee honour, because I always tend to put the clubs before, you know what I mean? I thought, well, the club's bigger than me, eh? Any club's better than any football. But anyway, I didn't get it, so it didn't bother. But it felt a wee bit.
Yeah, it's nice to be recognised, even with a nomination.
Well, as I say, I felt more so for the club. Stennismuir's not done anything really in their history, apart from surviving, eh? And I thought it'd be nice if the club got the song. Really didn't think anything to do with me, eh? I've never been like that. I've not been a bloke. Many players are, but I've never been like that, to be honest with you. Just go and enjoy the game, eh? That was always my just going.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to four for now. So I mean, who was the manager, and was there any difference to any of the other coaches or the other managers who just kind of picked the team on the day?
There was a guy called Alec Ray, and he played for Perth, so he had a lot of experience. And he was just Alec was very very active, and I did find that at Station Park. His coaching was it was kind of like being back in England, and he's pre he used to get the opponents assessed, and he would sit us down before the game and say, right, this is the way they're going, this is the system they're going to play. Back in the day, were the opponent who you were playing and stuff like that, and Alex would say, right, what we're going to do this to combat them. So football was beginning to change a wee bit there in respect of systems. Systems were getting more and more and more involved. And I thought, oh, this guy, he knows what he's about. And I remember going to, especially Tynecastle, playing Hearts in Scotland. And before the game, he fell him away. We were defending for 8 to 9 minutes. And Stuart Kennedy had a wonderful game that day to save us. We beat them 1-0. And I was delighted with that because I managed to get the goal that got Forfar through. Jimmy was in the crowd that day. They didn't have a game, so I got Jimmy Comps and 2 or 3 of my pals and colleagues for work, and they were standing in the enclosure and scored the goal, and I just gave them a wee wave. Okay, let's put us 1-0 up. Jimmy being a Hibs fan as well, he's jumping up. He's going, go on me man.
So is it double positive? One, you're a Hibs fan. Two, you've been rejected by Hearts, and suddenly you're putting them out of the cup.
Aye, it was a good moment for me, to be honest with you. It's funny because when I signed for Hearts, all my Hibs friends I was like Judas, oh, how can you sign for the Hearts when you're a Hibby? And then I remember on a Saturday night going home, and one of my mates had phoned up, she's going for a pint, Steve. I was like, aye. So we walked down to the pub, and there was 4 or 5 Hibs fans there. And I remember walking through the door, and I went, yes, here he is, our hero. I says, well, you're going to forgive me now then, after all these years? And he went, aye.
Brilliant. And so after you've put Hearts out of the cup, you've got Rangers in the semi-final. How are you heading into that game? I mean, it's such a contrast. And you've spoken before about how it's been difficult playing for a part-time team against a full-time team, but to be playing against Rangers.
Well, again, it brings on a different thing because, the mighty Glasgow Rangers or the mighty Glasgow Celtic. So, again, 100% to Alec the way he set us up to play against Rangers. He was a wee bit more positive, funny enough, in the semi-final because I wasn't up on my own like when we played Hearts at Tynecastle. He had decided press on the mid. It was a totally different game. We were more in against Rangers than what we were against Hearts. We had more of the ball. We were trying to use the ball better than we did at Tynecastle. And they so much quicker being. There's some scary moments, obviously. You can't go through 90 minutes without the goalkeeper making tremendous saves, goal line clearances, or the ball hitting the bar or the post. But we never really. We spoke about this at half time. It was nothing each half. And Alex says, how you we feel, I think we're doing okay, Alec. And he asked Jim Black, he asked Stuart. Stuart being ex-Scotland goalkeeper and ex-Rangers player. And the 3 years, we got the 3 years together. And he said, we didn't need to change anything, Alec. And he went, no, he says, I think we're doing okay. So Alec didn't change anything, and we just went out in the second half. Oh, thanks, Alec. That's me just not a cup of tea, sorry. But when we went in the second half, and we performed very well, very, very well. We got so that was our cup final, and then on Wednesday we went back to Hampden and they beat us 3-1. But we certainly didn't disgrace ourselves. And I think on the Wednesday, I think we're just was being part time again and then being full. The first 20 minutes was very, very. They kind of overrun us a bit there. I thought, oh, you're struggling here. You're going to get a tank. No, we just. I wouldn't say we put in 100%. I think we put in 110% that night, but they beat us. What I do remember from the first game, though, if I can take you back to the first, there was about 5 minutes to go, and our winger Stuart Porter at the time running at the box, and it was a guy called Kenny Black who was playing for Rangers, and a guy called Ali Dawson, and they took Stuart Porter out in the box, and it was a glaring penalty, an absolute stonewaller, but the referee never gave it, and I thought, if we'd have got that penalty and we scored, we'd have won them. And Aberdeen had already played the week before. They were already through the Scottish. I just remember, imagine that, an Aberdeen had fought for Scottish Cup final. That would have been something else, eh? Because we were in the second division at the time. They were magnificent. For a club of fourth size, it was a fantastic season. Really. But it's always a disappointment when you get beat, especially the team like Glasgow. But but we've done well, and I think we've done the town quite proud. So
What's it like going into work the day after you've played a cup semi-final against Rangers?
there's obviously when you sit in the car and you're driving along, and you're thinking, the morning after, you think, oh, maybe I could have done a wee bit better. Maybe could have done better there. But on reflection, I used to just say to myself, well, it is what it is. You can't change it. And the positive that you can take out of it, and I'm a great believer in taking positive out of something. You can't change. The positive thing was we done well for a part-time. Oh, nothing. Actually, quite proud going in. And then the guy would say, especially on the Monday after we got the draw, they said, "Oh, that was a fantastic result, Steve." I'm like, "Aye, we done." And some people would say, "Oh, saw it on the telly and blah blah blah." Accept it. But after the defeat, it's like, or before the game, you think we can still win this. We can still win this. After 20 minutes, we were struggling. Usually, but as I say, credit to the lads. They gave 110% that night, and we came off. We're quite, we didn't get gubbed 5-6. So, although we got beat 3-1, it was still quite a good performance from the lads, and I was proud of them. I must tell you that, especially youngsters. We had 2 or 3 youngsters. I thought they maybe had got overawed, but no, they didn't. They stuck to what Alec had, and they just played their own. And the experienced players like myself, Big Jim, Black, the goalie. And you can only say words to keep people's spirits up and encourage them, and that's what we try to do. And it worked for the young lads, and they all come off that part. We're all knackered, but aye, you could tell that the lads put 110% in, and I was being an older player, I was pleased for them and for what the club had done. This wee club's done well, and we did. But it would have been nice to get to.
But how do you reflect on your time at Forfar more generally?
Well, I did enjoy it, but I was working in the insurance industry at the time, and to be honest, I found it was getting a bit of a bind at the sort of tail end of the second, travelling up to Forfar after work, a day's work, and then travelling 84 miles up and 2 nights a week, and then up on a Saturday if it was a home game. It was big, for me, quite a bind, because the job, I was a manager of a sales team, and making sure that they were on their target levels all the time, and there was more to it than that. You were having to audit anything to do with paperwork. That was my job, and then holding sales stuff. So, to be honest, it was becoming too difficult, and I was getting. It was just one day we were going down to, and I don't know what it was. I just woke up on the Saturday morning, and I was picking the team bus up, and I thought, that's it, I've had enough. I'm packing in today. I was still in the cup. So we went down, had a pre-match lunch at a place called Ballantrae, just outside the Stranraer, and I just says to Alec, this day I says, can I have a word with you, Alec? He says, aye. So him and I went out, walked along the prom, and I said to her, I says, this is my last. I says, he says, what do you mean? So I was honest with him. I says, I'm finding it, which was, I says, could you play? Am I down to play? He says, aye, you're down. I says, well, can you play me then? He says, aye, definitely. Didn't hold it against me. He played me. Then we come up. No, he subbed me. I think it was 10 minutes to go, and he took me up. 'Cause I remember I was in the bath at the time, and he came in, and I just looked at me, and he put his hand out, and he says, all the best, wee man. That's all. Even on the coach coming back, I got off at Newbridge to pick him up, but it wasn't long after that when Alec had actually packed in as well. And I found out on the grapevine that he had been finding it quite difficult. So he had packed him, and he was a lot closer to Forfar than what we. Aye, so that was. I do remember as well. 2 days later, I got a telegram in from at Forfar. Sam Smith, his name was, because I was still in the club, and he said that Forfar were holding on to my register. Because in that particular pack, there was a year's option on it, so the club could hold. And just says, we won't allow you to be reinstated back junior. And I think I wrote him a letter actually. I just says, look, do what you want. I'm not thinking about going back junior. I says, if you want to hold on to the registration, then you can. And that's obviously what they done. I didn't bother playing football again. I was so it was a decision. It was a strange one because, as I said to you, it was just I woke up on a Saturday morning and decided that was it. I never regretted it, by the way.
So you were 30 when you packed in. You don't regret that decision. Do you have any other regrets from your career?
No, really, no, to be honest. I do know for a fact if I'd have stayed at Parkhead, there was no way I was going to break through all the old Lisbon lines. And in the reserve side coming through, it was Kenny, Danny, Vic Davison, Paul, Brian McLaughlin, other guys who were all probably deserved a chance more so than I did because they were wee, and a lot of them, because the lines were breaking up, and Joke was bringing in the youngsters bit by bit, giving them a wee game here and there, getting them used to being in the first team. I thought, I'm never going to break through here anyway. So really, I can't really honestly say that I regretted moving on for any of the clubs at all, apart from Stenning, because I actually loved it there and I really didn't want to move on. So no regrets whatsoever. And met a lot of great people, great food, some good managers, in my opinion. So some no. It's just an experience of what goes on behind the scenes, what happens on the pitch, different things like that. So I've absolutely no regrets. Made a lot of friends on the way, by the way. It's still keeping contact with a lot of them as well. It's friendships at last I like in that one. So yeah, I really.
Are you proud of your football career?
Aye, of course, of course. I, I think I would like to think that, especially as I was getting a wee bit, what experience that I picked up along, I would just like to think it had helped younger players that I played, and maybe a wee bit of the experience that I had rubbed off on them to make them better. I think that would be the best thing for me to have given back to football, that people could have learned a wee bit from me and they could learn from and other players. So, it's fine. It's great.
Brilliant. The reason for asking that question is that when I was up in Edinburgh in January, I was sat around with three or four of the guys that you played with at Meadowbank. I won't name them, but I was talking to them and saying, like, hang on, round this table we've got 500 games in the Scottish Football League. Like, you should be really proud of that. And I don't think they necessarily were, or they hadn't really thought about it. They just thought it was part of their lives and it wasn't a big deal.
I,
But actually, playing football at that level is such a huge achievement that you should be proud of.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head there when you say, or when you're playing, you really don't. you really don't think about it as such. It's just another game, and then the games, you play more and more and more. It's just figures for, and like a lot of players, as you just said, a lot of players wouldn't realise that they played. In fact, I phoned Kenny Davison last week. I was talking to, remember when I was on the phone to you about getting Erica,
Yeah.
and Kenny has said to me that he played just 200 or 300 games, I think it was. And I says, really? He says, Stevie, he says, I was your 16th. It just shows you what he
Yeah.
says, aye,
So
he says,
only 7 people played more games for Meadowbank than Kenny.
aye, there you are. I'm not saying it shocked me, it surprised me. I says, oh, I thought you'd maybe played 100 games. He went, no, Stevie, he says, I had a lot more than that. So he must have played another 3 years after I'd been there then. Do you know? Because I was only there 2 seasons, and Kenny was there. I think Kenny was there the year before. So there's 3 seasons.
Yeah, 75 to 81.
There you go. I didn't realise.
But yeah, like I say, you should be really proud of your football career.
No, thanks for that. I mean, when you think about it, I think you know as well, though, another thing that was happening with the forfeit as well wasn't just the psychological thing. I could feel my legs getting heavier and my fitness levels. You know what I mean? I've lost a yard in all football. When you've lost that yard or a couple, and the youngsters are running by you or what, or you can't beat a defender as you used to, you just know it's time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all. I've always felt like that. I'll know when it's time. Again, getting back to the forfeit days, I just knew it was time for me to go in more ways than one. So, but getting back to what I said as well, absolutely no regrets.
So I gather you left football to concentrate on your work in the insurance trade with your brother. Tell me a bit more about that.
When I was with Meadowbank, I had a business in the town. I was an Edinburgh taxi driver. So that's what I done. Jimmy done that as well. And Jimmy had left, and he went in the insurance industry. So Jimmy had left, he went in the insurance industry, and I followed him in, working for and Jimmy got promoted first. He went over to Dumfries as an assistant branch manager, and then 6 months later, I got my first, and then the company put me on the road. So my area, if you like, was from through the west, right through the central belt, right along with Berwick upon Tweed, and right down to New. So that I was living out of suits 4 days, 4 nights. So I done that for about a year, and then I got a promotion in Ashington. That's in North. I went and became a manager down there, and after 10 years, I decided to leave. Came back up the road, and I thought, what am I going to do? And a lot of my mates were still in the taxi trade, and I said, I'm going to go back in the taxi trade because I can be my own boss, I can work when I want, I can play golf. So I done that up until 7 years ago, and I had taxis, and I would drive myself on the night shift, and then I'd lease the taxis out on 2 day shifts and another night shift. So I made it quite a good living at that. Worked long hours, but good. I really enjoyed it. And about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, in fact, it was 2000. So what's that? 9 years ago, is it? I had an accident in the taxi right outside my door in Las Vegas. Actually, collapsed behind. I'd taken out a car at the time, ended up in the hospital, and seemingly, because it was funny enough, it was right outside the house. My partner had said to me she'd heard the crash and she'd come out, noticed it was me, got the fire engines and the services there, and I was out for 15 minutes. And I remember coming, sitting in and the windscreen was all smashed, and I was in the well of the. I now had my seatbelt on, so I hit the screen, and I remember my mouth being sore, my teeth were all bashed in and stuff everywhere. Anyway, it turned out it was a blood clot in my left. So we took the clot out on the Sunday, and on the Tuesday I was recuperating, and the surgeon came round and he said, told me what it was. He said, "You've got to come back." I says, "What?" He says, "You need an aorta bifemoral bypass." I'd never heard of that. I know what the aorta is. Aye, that's a bypass, It was a 5 hour operation. So I went back and I got it. And because I'd been in a crash, because it was a serious one, it wasn't fatal, thank God, for anybody, the DVLA took my licence off me, so that was me for 6. Got my licence back, and I thought, I'm not going back into the car again. When you've got things not working, that gives you a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
So I thought, what am I going to do? I still have to make a living, but I decided to sell my parts. It was nice. We made it in one big house, and we've done a wee bit B&B helping the local health coach. And I decided what to do with the capital that I'd got from the house. I decided to buy a little flat and do it up. Because my brother, he's in the building trade, and he taught me how to do a bit of joinery work, stuff like that. I won't touch electricity or gas because I'm not qualified for it. So that's what I've been doing since 2000, just buying property that needs done up, flip it over, try and make a bit of profit, and that's what keeps me. I mean, I'm 72 this year, I should be retired, but I've always been a bit of a workaholic, Morgan, so I do like to get up in the morning, get out of the house and work, so that's, but I think after I do this house I'm working on at the moment, another 4 or 5 weeks, and then I'll put that on the market and sell it, and then I might get down to writing.
Brilliant.
Because people
Fantastic.
have always said to me, like, people that really know me well, they've said, "You could write a book, Stevie." I said, "Oh, I don't know. I've not got the confidence." But I've always thought about it, but I wouldn't know the first place to start, to be honest.
Pen and paper. It's the best place to start.
I don't know whether to go back to when I was a kid or take it straight from the football days, You know what I mean? Or mix it up, maybe, I don't know.
I mean, chronologically, that's what I've tried here.
Aye,
Start from the beginning. I mean,
well, that's what they say, Best place to start is
I mean, that's why I'm doing this though. Like, so not only are you telling your own story, but people are hearing it in your voice, not only your own words. People are hearing your voice on this recording. That's why I think it's a really powerful
yeah,
opportunity.
it's powerful.
Yeah, hopefully. I want to move on now and talk about your brother Jimmy. I mean, for people that don't know, do you want to just tell us about how he's doing at the moment?
He's very poorly, to be honest. Jimmy he had cancer to begin with. 18 years ago, it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And then, about 9 years ago, he took a stroke. And the stroke had damaged his brain. And it's a part of the brain that retains short-term. So I remember getting called in to see the consultant, and he told me what it was he was suffering. He says he won't ever get this back, because once that part of the brain is damaged, with the blood cells, etc., etc., it'll not come back. He's always going to have short-term. So obviously, he couldn't drive. Jimmy went on his own and had his own insurance business down in Preston Pans near Musselburgh. So he had to give it. So, gone through, I was going down practically every day to look after him, make sure, he was getting out, etc. And 6 years ago, on top of all, he was diagnosed with it. And that's 6 years. He was in a top floor flat, so managed to get him out there. He was forgetting where he lived and all that. Got him a little flat on its own. ground floor, and couldn't remember how to get home from there. I thought, oh my God, this is horrendous. And then it's quite difficult. It's difficult because I just see them more or less.
I'm really, really sorry to hear that.
It's horrible. It's a horrible.
Affects a lot of
Yeah,
people.
it is.
Is there any kind of memorabilia or mementos of your career or Jimmy's that you've got?
Well, believe it or not, Morgan, I have a scrapbook and I've kept it since secondary school. 2 years ago, I hadn't seen any of these guys for 55 years or so, and I decided to go on the trace people. Back in the day at school, we had 14 players, managed to get 11. The other 3 had passed, so we'd all met up in a pub, and it was just so good to see these guys that you were successful with. And obviously they've all got their different careers and jobs to go to, but meeting them, it was fantastic. But what was quite funny was, as they're coming into there's me had my bike, and then I'd say to them, how are you, Alec? Oh, I've just got a couple of new TV. One of the other guys would come in, what's wrong with you? I've just had a new hip. The other guy would come in, oh, he says, I've just seen my ears. Other guy, I've just had my cataract. I says, well, we're on our 70s now. You know, it's like your body's going to break down. So, it was quite funny. So we actually meet up every sort of 3 months, and it's just so funny when you listen to these. The conversation always goes back to at school, and can you remember the Scottish Cup final when so and so, and can you remember the semi-final? Oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember this and that. I would do that, and they were such good players. Myself and Gordon. Oh, sorry, 3. Me, the goal, and a guy called Paul Herity, who played with Dun United when Dun United had a good team under Jim McLean. There was only 3 years with that side. These really great never got picked, and that's still surprising me to this day. Especially a guy called Jimmy Love, who is a too pure, great footballer, never got picked up. And I thought, how the hell did he never get spotted or picked up? So I just think you've got to get lucky to get.
Absolutely, and you certainly achieved that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. There we have it, Stevie Hancock. Really enjoyed speaking to Stevie and look forward to seeing him at the reunion in May. The 2025 Meadowbank Thistle reunion is taking place at Parkside Bowling Club in Edinburgh on the 31st of May. All the details of how to purchase will be shared on our social channels. Once you've got your ticket, this is what's in store. We have secured 3 speakers on the night. That's Alan Banks, Jim Leishman and Terry Christie. As if that wasn't enough, there will be a ceremony celebrating some of the club's biggest names. You'll get a programme, and there's even a buffet included, all for the very reasonable price of £10. I'll reiterate at this stage that I don't stand to gain anything financially from any of this work, and all profits from all of these activities will be donated to the Edinburgh Food Project. We're still looking to add more exciting activities to the agenda for the night. If you think you can support the event and or this podcast through sponsorship or in any other way, then please get in touch. For the event specifically, you can contact anyone on the reunion committee. That's myself, David Baxter, David Stoker, Alan Banks, Stuart Williamson, Laurie Dunn, Tom Hendry or Jim McQueen. So that's the reunion, 31st of May 2025 at Parkside Bowling Club, starting at 7 p.m. This is the Meadowbank Thistle podcast. I'm Morgan Knock, and for now, it's goodbye.